You were not called to be the peacekeeper of a broken system. The exhaustion you feel in your bones is not a lack of faith. It is not a sign of spiritual weakness. It is the crushing weight of pretending that everything is fine. Your soul knows it is not fine. You know the heavy ache of biting your tongue. You do it just to keep the peace at the dinner table. You have spent years shrinking yourself down. You have swallowed your righteous anger. You have ignored your own boundaries. You did all of this just to make everyone else comfortable. It is a suffocating existence. You walk into a room and your body instantly betrays you. Your nervous system goes on high alert. You begin measuring the emotional temperature of everyone else. You scan their faces. You listen to the tone of their sighs. You watch how they close a door or put down a glass. You have been trained to read these micro-expressions since you were a child. It was a survival mechanism. You adjust your own behavior to ensure that no one gets upset. You become whatever they need you to be in that exact moment. You have become a human shield for the dysfunction of your family. You absorb their anxiety. You absorb their unresolved pain. You do this so they do not have to face it themselves. You carry the profound exhaustion of being the only one who sees the toxic cycles. In your darkest moments, you wonder if your boundaries truly make you the villain. They tell you that you are the problem. They tell you that you are too sensitive. Every time you pull away to protect your own fragile peace, a suffocating wave of guilt crashes over you. It feels like you are betraying the very people who gave you life. You were taught that family is the ultimate foundation. You were told that blood is a sacred bond. You were led to believe that this bond must never be severed. It does not matter how much emotional pain it causes you. It does not matter if it destroys your mental health. So, when you consciously choose to walk away from the manipulation, you feel a profound sense of failure. You sit in the dark, sleepless hours of the night. You ask yourself if you are doing the right thing. You wonder if you should just try harder. You wonder if you should just endure a little more. You consider shrinking yourself down again to fit their mold. Wounded believer, listen to me. Your exhaustion is not a sign of moral failure. It is the heavy, aching evidence of your profound courage. You are breaking a cycle of pain that has lasted for generations. That kind of unseen, holy work requires a terrifying amount of strength. You are choosing the painful reality of truth over a comfortable illusion. In doing so, you are stepping into the unknown. You are carrying the weight of the past so the future might be free. For so long, religious structures reinforced this heavy burden. They hijacked the beautiful concept of peace and twisted it. They wove divine authority into human dysfunction. They told you that peace meant silence. They told you that peacemaking meant burying the truth so the abusers could stay comfortable. You were taught to fear a God who would surely punish you. You believed he would punish you if you did not endure your household with a submissive spirit. The ancient commandment to honor your parents was held over your head. It was not a gentle guide. It was a sharp weapon. It was used consistently to demand your total submission. It was used to enforce systems of emotional control. They painted a terrifying picture of a heavenly Father. This God perfectly mirrored the unreasonable demands of your earthly family. He was a distant, easily offended authority figure. He was far more concerned with your absolute obedience than with your psychological safety. This false image of God stood as a silent enforcer. He stood in the corner of every family argument. He implicitly demanded that you swallow your voice. He demanded that you hide your tears. You were systematically made to believe that enduring harm without complaint was the highest form of spiritual maturity. Setting a healthy boundary was treated as profound rebellion. It was seen as an act of treason against the divine order. This twisted theology bound you to your abusers. It demanded that you look at your own destruction and call it love. But we must look much closer at the true heart of the sacred. Drawing from Marcus Borg's framework, we are invited into a massive paradigm shift. We must move away from a God who demands quiet submission. We must abandon the terrifying image of a divine monarch who sanctions oppressive systems. Instead, we discover the God of compassion. We meet the encompassing Spirit who stands fiercely with the brokenhearted. You were taught that being spiritual meant being passive. You were told that a good believer never gets angry. A good believer never causes a scene. A good believer always turns the other cheek, even when the strike is abusive and relentless. But what if God is actually weeping with you in your anger? What if the divine presence is not standing alongside those who demand your submission? What if the divine is the quiet, insistent breath of freedom rising in your chest, beloved one? The encompassing Spirit is the steady presence holding your hand. He holds your hand as you finally gather your strength and walk away from the abuse. Honoring your parents does not mean surrendering your soul to harm. Compassion does not require you to remain available for repeated injury. To walk away from a toxic environment is not an act of hatred. It is a profound act of honoring the sacred worth of your own soul. You are learning that you can forgive from a safe distance. You can hold love and hope in your heart without offering your daily life up to be consumed. You are realizing that true peace is never built on a foundation of hidden pain. True peace requires the bright, burning light of honesty. It requires the courage to say that what happened was not okay. It requires the strength to build a wall where there used to be an open door. The Spirit is not asking you to be a martyr for your family's dysfunction. The Spirit is asking you to be a steward of your own sacred life. You are stepping out of the shadows of religious manipulation. You are walking into the clear, healing light of grace. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to breathe. This realization brings a profound shift regarding the intense emotions we have been told to suppress. We are accustomed to viewing anger as a dangerous moral failure. We have been taught it is a sign that we have slipped away from grace. We believe it is a fast track to bitterness and sin. But the Scriptures offer us a completely different vision. They offer us a vision of holy disruption. Consider the ancient narrative found in the 5th chapter of Amos. We see the prophet Amos standing before a deeply corrupt religious system. It was a system that offered beautiful, elaborate songs. It held solemn, majestic assemblies. The air was thick with the smoke of expensive incense. The music was flawless. The rituals were perfectly executed. But it was all a devastating lie. The religious elite were completely ignoring the crushing weight of injustice. They were trampling upon the vulnerable while praising God with their mouths. Amos did not politely ask them to reconsider. The voice of the divine speaking through Amos is not a gentle whisper. It is not a voice of passive acceptance. It is a roaring, terrifying demand. God says, "I despise your festivals." God demands for justice to roll down like waters. God demands righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Marcus Borg's work points us toward this prophetic tradition. In this tradition, the divine presence is not found in maintaining a toxic status quo. The divine is found in the fierce, roaring demand for justice. When Amos stood against the religious elites, his anger was not a sin. It was the very voice of God. It was the divine alarm system ringing out in the darkness. Your anger at how you have been treated is not a flaw in your character. It is your soul recognizing its own sacred worth. Your profound frustration at the toxic cycles in your family is not a rebellion against the divine. It is the divine waking up inside of you. It is the Spirit refusing to allow the sacred life within you to be trampled any longer. Your anger is the fiery boundary that says, "You may not treat me this way." However, we must learn the delicate pastoral balance of discerning the roots of our fire. There is a profound difference between sacred anger and ego anger. Sacred anger protects your boundaries. Sacred anger demands justice for the vulnerable. Defensive anger is born of an unhealed ego. It seeks blind retaliation. It wants to inflict pain for the sake of pain. One being awakened, your task is not to become vindictive. Your task is to let your anger serve as a holy shield. It must protect the vulnerable life within you. It must guard your peace without burning down the world out of spite. Your anger is holy. It is the energy required to break free. It is the fuel that allows you to finally stand up and walk out the door. It is the absolute refusal to participate in your own destruction. This journey of untangling our emotions brings us to a new way of encountering the sacred texts. It brings us particularly to the life of Jesus. For many of us, Jesus was presented as the ultimate people-pleaser. He was the ultimate example of passive endurance. We were told that following him meant allowing ourselves to be endlessly consumed. We thought we had to meet the endless demands of others. But what if the scriptures are a mirror? What if they reflect our own desperate search for freedom from these crushing expectations? Consider the startling event recorded in the 11th chapter of Mark. Jesus enters the temple in Jerusalem. This was the very center of religious and economic power. It was the heart of the establishment. He does not quietly find a corner to pray. He does not ignore the systemic exploitation happening all around him. He does not smile politely at the abusers. Instead, he begins flipping the tables of the money changers. He drives out those who were buying and selling. He actively dismantles the systems of exploitation that had taken over the sacred space. Imagine the sound of the heavy wooden tables crashing to the stone floor. Imagine the clattering of the coins scattering in every direction. Imagine the shock on the faces of the religious elite. Reading Scripture as sacrament helps us see Jesus in a completely new light. Borg reveals him not as a passive figure avoiding conflict. Borg reveals him as a fearless social prophet. He was a prophet who actively dismantled systems of exploitation. The Jesus who flipped the tables in the temple did not care about keeping the peace. He did not care about the comfort of the abusers. He did not prioritize the smooth running of the corrupt establishment over the absolute necessity of truth. He chose disruption over a false peace. When you finally set a firm boundary in your own life, you are doing the same thing. When you flip the tables of your family's toxic expectations, you are walking in his exact footsteps. It feels violent to them. It feels like an unforgivable disruption. But you are realizing that creating good trouble is sometimes the only way to survive. You are realizing that conflict is sometimes the only way to clear a space for genuine healing to begin. You are stepping into the wild, untamed legacy of the prophets. You are discovering that holy disruption is a profound act of love. You are choosing to disrupt the lie. You are choosing to flip the table of denial. You are choosing to scatter the coins of emotional manipulation. You are declaring your own heart to be a sacred temple. You are refusing to let it be a den of thieves any longer. As we navigate this new path, we find our ultimate companion. Jesus intimately understood the painful cost of breaking familiar, comfortable boundaries. The religious framework of his day placed immense, ultimate value on biological family. It demanded absolute tribal loyalty. It required an endless, exhausting pursuit of ritual purity. To step outside of those bounds was to risk absolute social death. It meant being cut off from your community, your heritage, and your safety. Yet, Jesus consistently challenged these deeply ingrained structures. He challenged them whenever they stood in the way of genuine love and spiritual truth. In the 3rd chapter of Mark, we see him radically redefine belonging. When told his mother and brothers were waiting outside, he looked at the crowd around him. He declared that whoever does the will of God is his family. He broke the absolute idol of biological obligation. And in the 5th chapter of Luke, we encounter another powerful and recurring theme. Great crowds of people were constantly gathering to hear him. They were gathering to be healed of their sicknesses. The demands on his time were absolute. The demands on his energy were staggering. The demands on his spirit were overwhelming. Everywhere he looked, there was another need. There was another sick person. There was another urgent crisis. Yet, the text tells us something radical. It tells us that Jesus would often withdraw to deserted places and pray. He would literally turn his back on the desperate, needy crowds. He did not allow the endless demands of the multitude to consume his soul. Borg taught the profound principle that Jesus embodied a politics of compassion. This politics of compassion often required a complete rejection of the politics of purity. It required a complete rejection of endless people-pleasing. Compassion without boundaries is just enmeshment. Jesus knew exactly when to walk away from the crowd. He did not let their relentless, desperate demands dictate his peace. He knew that, to save others, he first had to preserve his own connection to the Spirit. You do not have to answer every call. You do not have to attend every argument. You do not have to absorb everyone's anxiety to be a good person. Setting a firm boundary is not an act of selfish isolation. It is an act of absolute spiritual preservation. It is the necessary practice of creating a quiet, sacred space. It is a space where you can reconnect with the encompassing Spirit. Child of God, Hear this truth. You were not abandoned by your family system when you finally said no. You were released from the toxic role it needed you to play. The day you stopped explaining yourself was a holy day. The day you finally let go of the desperate need to make them understand. Your pain was the day of your liberation. It was the day the old system lost its power over you. You are stepping out of the rigid, confining boxes of biological expectation. You are entering into the expansive, life-giving community of the Spirit. You are finally learning to be a friend to your own soul. To walk this new path requires a fundamental shift. You must change your entire understanding of what it means to believe. Stripped of the familiar, toxic structures that once defined your entire existence, you are standing in a vast, open landscape. For the longest time, faith was presented to you as a matter of strict intellectual agreement. It was presented as unquestioning submission to authority. You were taught that being a good believer meant assenting to a specific checklist of doctrines. It meant blindly obeying religious leaders and family patriarchs. It meant completely silencing your own inner voice. In that old, terrifying paradigm, asserting your own needs was a sin. Stepping away from the fold was the ultimate failure of faith. It meant you were lost. It meant you were condemned. But as you stand in this quiet, open space of your new life, you are discovering something beautiful. You are discovering that genuine faith has very little to do with rigid certainty. It has absolutely nothing to do with people-pleasing. Borg teaches us that faith is not about conforming to external expectations. Faith is a radical trust. It is a courageous letting go. It is a releasing of the desperate need for human approval. It is a choice to float upon the wild, unseen currents of the Spirit. Chosen one, your calling is not to be a doormat. It takes immense, staggering faith to stop being the good person they want you to be. It takes profound courage to start being the authentic person the Spirit is calling you to be. This calling is not a badge of spiritual superiority. It is not an ego trip. It is a profound, often lonely responsibility. It is born of deep, agonizing compassion. It takes immense faith to let go of the only family dynamic you ever knew. It does not matter how painful it was. It was still familiar. It was still the only home you had. To walk away from that requires you to float on the deep, uncharted sea of God's goodness. You are trusting that even though you cannot see the far shore, you will not sink. You are trusting that even though you do not have a perfectly mapped out plan for the future, the encompassing Spirit will not let you drown. You are trusting that the peace you feel in your moments of quiet solitude is truer than the noise of your past. That quiet peace is more real than the chaotic, demanding, critical voices that used to govern your mind. This is the very essence of true faith. It is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the quiet, steadfast resolve to walk forward in the dark. It is the choice to be guided only by the gentle, inner light of the Spirit. You are learning to trust the compass of your own heart. You are learning that the voice of God often sounds like the quiet instinct telling you to protect yourself. You are learning to stand incredibly still in the midst of the storm, knowing that the Spirit is standing right there beside you. As you continue to walk this path, one step at a time, something miraculous happens. The heavy, crushing burdens you have carried for so long begin to slip from your weary shoulders. You have spent years, perhaps decades, trying to translate your pain. You tried to translate it into a language your family could understand. You contorted yourself into impossible shapes. You compromised your deepest boundaries. You offered up your own peace of mind. You did all of this in a desperate, heartbreaking attempt to fix the unfixable. You tried to heal the people who were completely unwilling to look at their own wounds. You believed that if you just absorbed enough of their anger, they would finally be happy. You believed that if you just mediated enough of their endless conflicts, you could finally bring peace to your home. You made yourself a human sacrifice on the altar of family harmony. But the gentle, persistent whisper of the Spirit is inviting you to lay that impossible burden down. You are finally beginning to realize a terrifying and beautiful truth. Their healing is not your responsibility. You cannot do the work of internal transformation for them. You are not required to set yourself on fire simply to keep them warm. Learning to trust again. Hear this truth deep within your spirit. Let it sink into your weary bones. You do not have to carry the heavy burden of fixing them. You do not need their validation to be whole. You have spent your entire life believing a lie. You believed that your worth was tied to your usefulness. You believed your worth was tied to your obedience. You believed it was tied to your ability to absorb the dysfunction of those around you. But the sacred presence sees you entirely differently. The Spirit looks at you and sees inherent, unshakable worth. You can stop trying so hard. You can stop exhausting yourself to keep everyone else warm. You are allowed to be completely yourself. Anger, boundaries, and all. Your anger is holy. Your boundaries are sacred. Your departure was not a tragedy. It was a rescue mission. You belong deeply and permanently to the Spirit of truth. You belong to the God of compassion. Rest now in the absolute knowledge that your courageous departure was the beginning of your true arrival. You are not the wound of your family. You are the place where the generational bleeding finally stops. You are the sacred ground where the healing begins. You are held. You are safe. And you are deeply, infinitely, unconditionally loved. The nightmare of pretending is finally over. The exhausting performance has come to an end. You have crossed over the sea of fear, and you have reached the shores of belonging. Breathe deeply now. The air here is clean. The peace here is real. The Spirit is holding you in a gentle, unending embrace. Welcome home to yourself.